Standing out here today on this massive area of ryegrass, I wanted to explain what I did a couple weeks ago and how it's sort of transitioned into what it looks like right now. And so ryegrass has long been used in mixes, but it wasn't necessarily a standalone lawn in many situations. Of course, down south, when they're overseeding golf courses or overseeding Bermuda grass, perennial ryegrass is very common for that use. But as far as up here, up north, having a huge yard of ryegrass like this, not a very common thing, at least in the past. But I've been really making it sort of, I guess, my journey here. Study ryegrass, become very familiar with it, but I feel pretty comfortable with it now, and I wanted to explain why I decided to scalp this thing down in 90-degree weather and why you might want to do something similar if you have a ryegrass lawn in the future. So first things first, this is about 60,000 square feet of ryegrass that I planted for my front yard golf course area. Did this last fall, about late September, and so that's about how old this is now. Looking pretty good this season. We've had really cooperative weather as far as just a bit of a stretch of 90s there in June, but after that it's been more of our average weather here, so mid 80s or so, and we have been getting sufficient rainfall, so that's made things a lot easier for me. So what I've learned about ryegrass though on being a first year plant, so that first season after you planted it, that spring season when you get into the seed head stage and those stems and those stalks of those plants stick around, sometimes that brown can actually stick around into your summer season and it continues to look a little more brown. I've noticed that the lower that you go, the less that this seems to be an issue, but on some areas, if you're mowing 2 inches or higher than that, then you definitely probably are noticing that maybe it hasn't gone away from that springtime. So I was at just over an inch here, mowing very consistently with my zero turn. Things are looking pretty good, but I know that I still see some of those brown and stemmy pieces. And actually, I will show you right here. Took a little video last week of an area that was still holding on to some of those brown stems. As you look across the lawn here, you could still see that brown mixed in, and it wasn't looking fantastic. So against all logic, a few years ago, I had this happening, and I was probably in early August or so, and it was still just not turning around and not looking great. So I decided, what's going to be the worst that happens if I just cut this down to the ground and sort of let it regenerate? So this is something that warm season grasses, people might be familiar with, even in the middle of your season, is kind of scalping it down and letting things regenerate. But that's not very typical, especially in 90-degree weather here in the summertime on cool season lawns. But for some reason, as I said, against all logic, it seems to work out well for me on this ryegrass. So I decided this year, let's do it again. But the issue was I was pretty much as low as I could go on my zero turn. So surprisingly, my neighbor has a fairway mower that he picked up at an auction for pretty cheap. He's been fixing it up and getting it working here, and he's like, oh, I can bring that over. And we can set it at about 3/4 of an inch, see how much we take off, and sort of see what happens after that. I'm always a little bit reluctant to do that, but I just decided, you know, again, for science sake, let's just go ahead and try it. So that's exactly what we did. He brought that over, and here's a little footage of that scalp. So you're gonna have to be prepared for the pain that you're gonna experience in that first week. It always feels a little bit weird to look at it and say, I don't know if this was a good idea whatsoever, but here's a couple of pictures. I was planning around some rainfall, but of course that rainfall didn't happen, so I did use a sprinkler out here, spent a bunch of time getting some water on it and trying to get it to come back. So I didn't apply anything though, just simply water, and that was it. And so I started to see the green come back little by little by little, and then we got about 3 to 4 inches of rain in about a day's time. This is another key factor, is that sometimes rainfall can really help to rejuvenate things, and a lot of people will ask, what did you apply? What made it look like this? And it was simply just the rainfall that we got at the right time to really help things get going again. The scalp though, very key to getting down, cutting out some of those brown and stemmy plants, and then the grass decides from there, okay, now I'm gonna start putting leaves back out, and you get a lot better green up, and then you end up with what it looks like right now, which is about 2 weeks out from where it was. So if you were going into a period where it's gonna be really, really hot, not any rainfall, and you're not gonna be able to water or do anything like that, then I wouldn't suggest that. But if you can get out there, get some water on it after you do this process, then I think you might be surprised at what happens, even though it's not the ideal time frame. I've only put about a pound of nitrogen on this total for the entire season, and my first application of the year in the spring with my pull behind spreader didn't go so well, and so I have a little bit of stripes there that you can see from where the fertilizer was heavier in one area. Didn't spread out so nicely, and that's actually still sticking around as far as the visuals go. But after that scalp, that really helped to transition this thing back into looking good. Now we have some really hot weather coming up. This is about the time frame here in my location in Iowa where we get to our hottest part of the season. It's probably going to get a little bit more stressed before we get to the fall season, but I think the bounce back that I saw earlier in the season when it was really dry for a stretch of period there and in the 90s, back to what it looks like right now, I think we're going to cross our fingers and hope we can make it to the finish line this year. And then usually second, third year lawn will start to get stronger and more mature. Not saying that you can't have any issues with it, but the first year it seems to be a bit more fragile, and you try to get through that as much as possible. So that's what I did and how it turned out. I just wanted to share that with you today. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.